Thank you, everyone, for being present today. I'd like to thank in particular the temple authorities for inviting me to give class here this morning in our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. So I have been asked to speak Canto 10, Chapter 23, verses 48, 49, 50, 51, and 52. So we'll kind of like breeze through it a little bit because there's a lot of nectar to discuss today. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll just read the Sanskrit because we have a lot of material to cover. Desha Kala Padhagdharvyam Mantra Tantra Dvajo Yana Devata Yojamanascha Kratu Dharmascha Yanmaya. Translation: all the aspects of sacrifice, the auspicious place and time, the various items of paraphernalia, the Vedic hymns, the prescribed rituals, the priests and sacrificial fires, the demigods, the patron of the sacrifice, the sacrificial offering, and the pious results obtained are all simply manifestations of his opulences. Yet even though we had heard that the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, the Lord of all mystic controllers, has taken birth in the Yadu dynasty, we were so foolish that we could not recognize Sri Krishna to be none other than him. Text 50. Let us offer our obeisances unto Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His intelligence is never bewildered, whereas we, confused by his power of illusion, are simply wandering about on the paths of fruitive work. Text 51. We were bewildered by Lord Krishna's illusory potency, and thus we could not understand his influence as the original personality of Godhead. Now we hope he will kindly forgive our offense. Text 52 with Srila Prabhupada's purport. Thus reflecting on the sin they had committed by neglecting Lord Krishna, they became very eager to see him. By being afraid of King Kamsa, they did not dare go to Braj. Purport: realizing their offense against Lord Krishna and finally appreciating his almighty position, the Brahmanas naturally wanted to rush to Braj and surrender at the lotus feet of the Lord. But they were afraid that Kamsa would certainly kill them when his spies reported that they had gone to Krishna. The Brahmanas' wives were absorbed in ecstatic Krishna consciousness and thus went to Krishna anyway. Just as the gopis, simply to dance with the Lord, traveled in the dead of night through a forest inhabited by wild animals. But the Brahmanas were not on such an advanced platform of Krishna consciousness, and thus, overcome by fear of Kamsa, could not see the Lord face to face. Thus ends the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 23rd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Brahmana's Wives Blessed. So this was a purport by our dear God brothers. Hare Krishna. Oma Gyan Timidandasya Gyanan Gana Shalakaya Chaksura Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadanti Svapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakti Vrindavan Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare. So we have reached the end of this chapter. which is entitled The Brahmanas' Wives Blessed. And so I thought today that I would give a summary of the chapter, because I believe devotees keep arriving here in Vrindavan up until and through the month of Kartik. So for those of you who have arrived recently, maybe didn't catch all the important verses and commentaries by the illustrious speakers of the Bhagavatam here, I'll give a summary of the chapter. It's a very important chapter, and I'll do it along with some of the very valuable commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. One time in London, I had the great privilege, to carry a very heavy suitcase of Srila Prabhupada. We'd just flown in from New York with Prabhupada to London. And when we got there was a lot of hustle and bustle. And, it appeared that one of Prabhupada's suitcases had gone missing. So Prabhupada said, someone has to stay back and wait for the suitcase. So I hid behind a pillar, because I'd heard that at the temple, that George Harrison was going to be at the temple to receive Srila Prabhupada, and the feast was being cooked by Mother Jamuna. And for those two reasons, I had to get there, and to hear Srila Prabhupada's lecture and his kirtan and everything. And Prabhupada said, "Where is Indradyumna?" And I kind of melted behind the pillar, came out, he said, "You stay, you stay." So it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because the suitcase came 2 hours later. And I was, cursing the suitcase because I missed Prabhupada's lecture. Anyway, it's a long story, but I took the suitcase, I jumped into a cab. It was pouring rain. I was tired. I hadn't eaten in many hours on the flight. And I got to the temple, Seven Buri Place, our first temple. And I got out and paid the taxi driver and came to the door of the temple with this heavy suitcase. And in this suitcase, I learned later, were all the books that Prabhupada would utilize for his translation work. Amongst them, the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentaries on the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I was carrying that in service to my guru. I was such a neophyte devotee. I didn't realize what mercy I was getting. So then I came to the temple door and I opened up, and the feast was just finishing. And all the brahmacharis were on their sides, and I could see all these paper plates with, the finger streaks going through them. They got the last bit of the ghee and the sugar and whatever. And I said, "Hey guys, can you help me carry this suitcase to Prabhupada's room?" They went, "Oh, we ate so much. It was the best feast we ever had. We can't move." I said, "Did you save any?" "No, it was so good." I was like, "Wow." So then I said, "Where's Prabhupada's room?" And they said, 3 stories up. If you know anything about England, everything's tiny there. It's like a little girls' play school box or something. So I had to carry that suitcase up all those staircases like this. By the time I got to the top, I was finished. I was a young man, only 22, but exhausted. So I saw a sign, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this is Prabhupada's room. But I was so tired, I just opened the door and I walked in backwards, dragging that suitcase. And Prabhupada's servant said, "Watch out! Watch out, you're going to bump into Srila Prabhupada." So I turned around and Prabhupada was right in front of me. He was like golden like the sun. He was wearing a pink and white gamsha. He was on his way to get a massage. So I hit the deck, as we used to say. I hit the ground, and his lotus feet were right there, and I kind of put my head on his toe. And I said my obeisances, as a disciple should do. There was a pause. All of a sudden, whoosh, Prabhupada slapped me on the back. So hard, right here. I thought if I ever get a tattoo, I'm not into tattoos. If I ever get a tattoo, my tattoo would be the imprint of Prabhupada's hand. Hare Krishna. You can still feel it. It was very hard. Prabhupada was strong. Then Prabhupada said something, And I was shaking in fear. I thought I was being chastised for my improper etiquette in coming in backwards to the room. Prabhupada said something quite, loud, but I was so nervous I didn't hear. And then the lotus feet walked away, and I waited till I heard the door close. He went into the room to have the massage. And then I stood up, and Prabhupada's servant, Nanda Kumar, he was there, and his mouth was, agape, like this. Eyes were wide open. He said, I never saw Srila Prabhupada do that before. He slapped you on the back. Yeah, I know. And he said something wonderful. Oh, wonderful. He said, yeah. I said, what did he say? He said, Prabhupada told you, so much endeavor in this material world, but when I take you back home, back to Godhead, everything will be easy and sublime. So when a spiritual master gives an instruction to one disciple, because the instructions are all absolute, it can be taken for all followers of Srila Prabhupada, that we're endeavoring in this material world, we're endeavoring to keep body and soul together, and we're endeavoring to spread the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya, both of which take a lot of endeavor, and many obstacles come up. So when obstacles come up, I just remember that if I keep serving, keep on the straight and narrow path, then in the end Prabhupada will take us back to Godhead. He said, where life is very easy and sublime. There's no difficulties there. So whatever the problem, we've got a bright future. Just keep going. So I was thinking of that this morning before I came over here, because I want to mention some of those commentaries of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, which Prabhupada drew on very heavily, actually. So, this pastime of the wives of the Brahmanas getting so much mercy from Krishna, as you know, because it's the end of the chapter. This actually took place, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in a sub-forest of Vrindavan. As you know, there's 12 main forests in Vrindavan, but then within each of those forests, there's a sub-forest. And within those forests, there's a sub-sub-forest. And then in those forests, a sub-sub-forest ad infinitum, because Vrindavan expands beyond our imagination. So in one of those sub-forests, this pastime took place. That sub-forest is called Papadavan. Papadavan. I'd never heard of Papadavan. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur confirms it. These are all details, but these are details that we seek and we relish. Papadavan. And in his epic Jaiva Dharma, one time Prabhupada said that's the handbook of Krishna consciousness. It has yet to be translated, but I think the BPT is actually working on it. In Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Jaiva Dharma, in part 178, he writes, and I'll quote him because that's the best way. Vrindavan, the forest of Vrinda, he writes, the forest of Vrinda, because Vrinda gave the forest to Sri Radha. It's the famous place where Sri Krishna enacted many of his enchanting leelas. It is one of the 12 forests of Vrindavan, and within it are 12 smaller forests. Now I mentioned there are ad infinitum, those forests, but he writes including the following forests. These are some of the sub-forests you may want to visit. Actually, in this upcoming Kartik, I'm going to be taking devotees to some places that we don't generally go, and I want to include all these forests. So here's some of the sub-forests, of which this Papadavan is one. Very interesting. He lists a Talavan, which he describes as a mountain forest. There's a forest with mountains. He lists Kora Revhana, which is an osprey forest. I believe that's a type of tree. Viharavan, which is the pleasure pastime forest. Gochara Navhana, which is a cow herding forest. It's where the boys go to herd the cows. No girls allowed. Kaliya Dhamanavan, the forest of subduing the Kaliya serpent. Gopalavan, the cowherd boys' most favorite forest. Nikunjavan, the bower forest, where Krishna goes with Sri Radha and the Sakis and the Manjaris and the ladies, and they have their pastimes there. Nidhuvan is described as a treasure forest. Imagine a treasure forest. Then there's Radhabhaga. Radhabhaga means it's Radha's garden. Who would like to go to Radha's garden? Then there's Julavana forest, which is where the swing pastime takes place. Then there's Gavaravhana. It's the secret forest. I don't know what to say. It's a secret forest. And lastly, there's Papadavan, where this pastime of the deliverance of or rather the wives of the Brahman getting special mercy. But that is a forest of harsh mountains. We heard about a forest of mountains. These are harsh mountains, maybe something like the Himalayas or something, which are obviously sacred. So I was reading that this Papadavan forest, it stretches from Adibhadri Ghat to the village of Batror, Bhatror. I don't think that was mentioned in the purports in this chapter. But the exact village, we know the forest, and now we know the village, Batror. The Batror is in this wonderful forest. And this is where the wives of the Brahmanas provided foodstuffs for Krishna and Balaram and all the cowherd boys. It took a little while. There's a whole build-up to that time they took prasadam. So at the end, when they took the prasadam, the boys were totally in ecstasy. Now, Raghunath Das Goswami, for those of you who are familiar with Brajavilas Stava, this is one of the wonderful books that Sri Raghunath Das Goswami has left us. In his Brajavilas Stava, in text 86, he writes about this place, this village. He writes about this village. I'll also quote him. He writes in text 86, the beautiful, wealthy, and learned wives of the sacrificial Brahmanas voluntarily, happily, and devotedly fed Krishna, Balaram, and all their affectionate friends many varieties of the 4 kinds of foodstuffs, each dish surpassing the taste of nectar. We bow down to offer our respects to the place where Krishna enjoyed this pastime. So now this, you know very clear exactly where this place is. Who would like to go to Bhartwar? Okay. So as you know, this is it's a very beautiful, it's a very instructive pastime, and it all began in which season? There's 6 seasons in Vrindavan, and they exist simultaneously. Not like we go through the year and the seasons come and go. In Vrindavan, there's 6 seasons which exist simultaneously. So some days, Radha and Krishna, they go through the summer season, and then they pass into the winter season, then they go to spring and into autumn and the dewy season. This is Vrindavan, it's magical. You can go to different seasons in one day. So this pastime, another detail, it took place on a summer day. It took place on a summer day. Actually, a few months after Krishna had stolen the clothes of the unmarried gopis. Now on that day, Krishna, Balaram, the cowherd boys, they're walking on the banks of the Jamuna in the direction of Mathura. Just like if you do Vrindavan Parikrama, you're going around Vrindavan Parikrama, you get to the south side a little bit before you come on the turn coming up around, and there's the road to Mathura. There's a big arch there. Sometimes they have, different floral designs and tapestries there. I always wondered what it was. There's this big arch, and there's this big road, sandy road. I said one day, where's that go? And someone said, Mathura, don't walk that way. Of course, Mathura is divine, but, as Jiva Goswami explained, there's perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. Dwarka is perfect. Krishna's pastimes are perfect because he desires to reside there as a royal king, and he has his servants, and they want to serve him in that rasa. But then he said, Mathura is more perfect because the loving sentiment enters. But then Vrindavan is most perfect because of the perfect love of the Brajabasis, and particularly the gopis. So perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. So if you see that road to Mathura, you can pay obeisances, but stick to Braj. So they're walking around, and they're near that road that goes to Mathura, but Vishwanath says, being fully omniscient, Krishna knew that some ritualistic Brahmins were performing sacrifices some distance from there in the village of Bhartur. However, he mentions that Krishna wasn't very interested to meet them because they were performing sacrifices simply to be elevated to Svargaloka, the heavenly planets. That's about as high as you can go in the material world, the heavenly planet, Svargaloka. But our vision is far beyond Svargaloka. Prabhupada wrote in a posthumous letter to my dear godbrother, Jayananda Prabhu, who had passed away. Posthumous means after the death. He wrote a letter to him and he said, "Thank you for all the wonderful service you've done. You were the first one to give me money for printing my books, etc. You organized the Rath Yatra. So if you had any amount of material desires, when you died, you've gone to Svargaloka. You don't have to take birth on this nasty planet again. You've gone to Svargaloka. And from there, you can continue your devotional service and go back home, back to Godhead." He said, but because you were hearing the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra when you left your body, everyone had gone to Mangalarti. Jayananda was alone. And there was a tape of Prabhupada singing Hare Krishna. Prabhupada said, this chanting should be heard particularly from the lips of a pure devotee. That's why it's so important to keep hearing Prabhupada's bhajans. We have our famous bhajans. We have our most dear, favorite kirtaniers, but Prabhupada should be our favorite kirtanier. Because when he chants, it's pure bhakti. So Prabhupada said, because you were hearing the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra when you died, I say you have gone to Krishna Loka. Jayananda Prabhu ki, Sri Rath Yatra Maha Mahotsava ki. So these Brahmanas, this was their goal, to get to Svargaloka, because there's hardly any miseries there. There's one misery, actually Prabhupada mentioned, the only misery is that there's this rumor that the demons are coming. Rumors, you can get any anxiety. The rumors, because sometimes the demons attack Svargaloka. So Prabhupada said that's the only thing. So they wanted to go there. But there you take birth, there you get disease, there you grow old, there you die in small proportion. But so this is not intelligent. Actually, Krishna mentions this false intelligence in Bhagavad Gita. He says, Yami mam pushpitam bacham prabadhan yavi pachishtaha Veda vada rata parta nanyar astiti vadiyanha. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to Svargaloka, result in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there's nothing more than this. There's nothing more than sense gratification. Hello, you're Brahmanas, you're practicing Vedic rituals. Jeev Jago, wake up. However, it's interesting, Krishna was very eager. We say in Sanskrit, loyam, it's like a greed. He was very eager to meet the wives of those Brahmins because those ladies were pure devotees. Now we generally think that, in the context, we're very eager to meet Krishna. But Krishna's a person. He's a supreme person. He has his emotions, his pure transcendental emotions. He's also very eager to meet his devotees. To think like that. Like when you go for darshan in front of the deities, darshan doesn't just mean you're looking at Krishna. Darshan means Krishna is also looking at you. He's looking into your heart and see what's required for you to come to the stage of pure devotional service. So an advanced devotee will not just go in front of the deities to see how nice they look today, which we should. The pujaris go to a great service in dressing the deities very nicely to capture our attention. But we should stand there and open our hearts and let Krishna do his business, purify our hearts, and help us to awaken our prem bhakti, our devotion for him. Because our efforts are there, but more powerful is the desire of the Supreme Lord. He wants us to come back to Godhead, Prabhupada said, more than we want to go back to Godhead. So we should stand in front of the deities for a long time. So, because of this, Krishna started leading the boys in that direction, to that village where the wives of these Brahmanas lived. But as they neared that village, it was lunchtime. And all the boys started to get really hungry. Now this is a theme you often see in Braj Leela. The boys are always hungry. Because boys will be boys. Frogs and snails and puppy dog tails. That's how one poet described boys. And girls, sugar and spice and everything nice. So boys will be boys, so these boys are always hungry. But on that particular day, the lunch that Mother Yasoda was supposed to send for everyone was late. What? Mother Yasoda cooked for everybody? Most often, the boys would take lunches that their mothers cooked for them. But on special occasions, Vishwanath says, Mother Yasoda would cook for everybody. One of those special feasts, right? But on that day, all the tiffins were late. I'm not explaining, all the tiffins were late. So the cowherd boys, they famously approached Krishna and Balaram, and they said, Rama Rama Mahabaho Krishna Dushta Nibarhana Esha Vai Bhadhate Shunnas Tach Chantim Kartum Arhat. O Rama Rama, meaning Balaram, mighty armed one. O Krishna, chastiser of the wicked, we are being harassed by hunger, and you should do something about it. This is Sakyaras. You should do something about it. So in his commentary in his pastime in Sarata Dharshani, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says the boys added something. Krishna, the Vedas say that hunger is man's worst enemy. If you can destroy our hunger now, then you will be successful in conquering any enemy. We bless you. Sakyaras, the boys, they're equal. So Krishna smiled and he said, dear friends, I perfectly understand. I'll just go straight ahead and you'll come across some Brahmanas. Namo Brahmanya Devaya, Om Brahmanya Hitaya Cha, Jagaditaya Krishnaya, Govinda Namo. Brahmanas are very dear to Krishna. So he said, you go to these Brahmins who are performing, this particular group of Brahmins, they're performing sacrifice to go to heaven. Then you tell them, Balaram and I have sent you and asked for food. Now Krishna, he knew that these Brahmanas, although, Brahmanas are pious, they had little or no devotion for him. Thus they knew that they would ignore the boy's request. Abhigna Swarat, Krishna, he's present everywhere, and thus he knows everything. Abhigna Swarat. So he knew that they would refuse. But his real intention was that afterwards he would send the boys to the wives of the Brahmin who love him unconditionally and wanted to just give whatever Krishna wanted, all these different foodstuffs. He wanted to show the boys, essentially, really us, that the real purpose of religion is only loving service to him, not ritualistic activities for elevation to Svargaloka. Savai pumsham paradharmo yato bhakta radoksaje ahetuki apatiyata yayatma shupashidati. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which man can attain to the loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted in order to completely shantushti, satisfy the self. So in this pastime, essentially, Krishna is comparing these ritualistic Brahmins with the pure gopis, or gopis, the wives of the Brahman, they're also gopis. He's comparing the two. For us also. Sometimes you need to compare things to understand which is superior. Fairly soon there'll be the mango season, and when you go to the market, you pick out the mango, lots of mangoes, but you pick them up and you look for the mango that's yellow and has black spots. And then you offer it to Krishna and eat it as you please. The black spots indicate it's ripe. So you compare them. So in this pastime, we see how Krishna, we'll see how love of Krishna, Krishna Prema, is far superior to Svargaloka. Krishna Prema, this is the Param Gatim. We have to always be reminded of what is, because we get distracted. Neophyte devotee means he gets distracted. We know the goal philosophically, but no Vigyan is there. We haven't realized it. We get distracted sometimes from the goal. To be reminded that pure devotional service to Krishna, that's the goal. That's sweeter than the sweet. One philosopher said, life is only meant for the purpose of tasting the sweetness of love of God. For there is a saying, life is the flower for which love is the honey. Everyone wants to love and be loved. That can only be perfected in Krishna consciousness. So we see that the selfless love, the character, the lives of the Brahmins' wives is what really pleased Krishna. So we want to become like them. We want to become Brajavasis. We don't identify as American, Australia, Chinese, Espanols, Spanish. There's a strong, tendency. One of America's patriots said, I lament I only have one life to give for my country. He died, the British executed him. I regret I only have one life to give for my country. No. We're all Brajbasis. We're being trained to be Brajbasis, and that's why devotees have to come to Braj from time to time. In this atmosphere, it's so inspiring for becoming Krishna conscious. Not once or twice in our life, but if we can arrange our lives in such a way, put the money aside and come to Vrindavan. Prabhupada said, even in nectar devotion, even if someone who's not Krishna conscious goes to Mathura, is on business, let's say, and he spends a fortnight there, Prabhupada said he can experience the special nature of Mathura Vrindavan Dham. It's overwhelming here, so we should come. Now, at this point, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that some commentators say that Krishna was intent on reciprocating with one particular, one of these Brahmana ladies, because she was on the verge of attaining the 10th stage of love for God, like the gopis. The Brahmana's wives, we'll see, they made a little error. Not an error, but in the end they went back home when Krishna sent them home, and they went back home. Whereas the gopis, they stayed in the forest with Krishna, even at the expense of losing their reputation. So Prabhupada said that the gopis were more advanced than the Brahmana ladies. But amongst these Brahmana ladies, it's very interesting. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said one of them was very special. She was almost on the level of those selfless gopis. She was just about to attain the 10th stage of love of God. Now I read that. That's the perfection is the gopis. They're on the 10th stage of love of God. Love of God's a gradual process. We are, in the process. We're works in progress. Okay, we're at the very beginning, but as Confucius said, the longest journey begins with the first step. We're practicing devotion. We're bhakti yogis. But you get to the 10th stage. We should hanker for that. That love is characterized by 10 symptoms. Would you like to hear what they are? Keep them in mind. Those gopis are worried. They're sleepless. They have anxiety. They've lost their appetite. They lack an interest in dressing up. They cry a lot. They feel faint. They're lazy. They lose consciousness, and they're on the verge of death. Hello? It sounds like, you go to the doctor, and the doctor said, you're really sick, you're sleepless, anxiety. But these are all emotions on the transcendental platform, which in their own way are conducive for developing love for Krishna. All emotions are there in the spiritual world, except envy, envy. Envy is it's a cardinal sin which causes us to fall from the spiritual world. So this gopi, this wife of the Brahman, she was just on the verge of developing all those transcendental. We'll hear about her later. So as the hungry boys, quickly set off, Krishna said, go to find the Brahmanas and ask for food. Krishna stopped them. He said, my friends, I want to give you a warning. Be aware, my friends, beggars must always be tolerant. How many of you have done Sankirtan? Come on, everybody. You know what it's like. You have to be very tolerant. So Krishna told the boys, you have to be tolerant here. So the boys, they very joyfully made their singing on the way to the village. Oh, we're going to eat. And when they got to the sacrificial arena, there the Brahmins were. And it's described, it's really cute, these little boys. It's described that when they arrived, they enjoyed seeing the fire and the smoke of the yajna, and hearing the chanting of the Samaveda, and smelling the burning ghee. Because by smelling the burning ghee, their mouths started to water in anticipation of the delicious food. They would offer to Krishna, but Krishna would give back to them. So just by smelling the ghee of the sacrificial fire, they're thinking of prasadam. These are cowherd boys. So the boys approach the Brahmanas, and they very humbly, they join palms, and they offer obeisances. Vishwanath says, just as they had been taught at home by their parents who would serve their deities and do dandavats. This is what the boys, they learned how to offer obeisances from their parents worshipping the household deity. So when they saw the Brahmins, they did their dandavats, but it said the Brahmanas were falsely proud of their social status, and they just ignored the boys because they were mere cowherds. All these mere cowherds have come. So remembering Krishna's warning, the boys said, "O earthly gods, we are friends of Krishna and Balaram, and request you kindly hear us. Today we have come a great distance herding our cows, but we have not brought any food from home. And like Balaram and Krishna, we're hungry." Now usually, we say Krishna and Balaram. Here the boys are saying Balaram Krishna. Because Krishna had told the boys to mention Balaram first, because these caste-conscious Brahmins would be more likely to give to his elder brother born as a Kshatriya than to him born as a Vaishya. So the Brahmins, they said to themselves, Krishna and Balaram are not Brahmanas. We cannot offer food to them until after we have eaten, because that is the tradition in Brahminical culture. But the innocent boys, they replied with, you could say, the essence of all truth. But sirs, Krishna and Balaram are hungry. Krishna, there's nothing else to do. If Krishna's hungry, then you feed Krishna. But the Brahmanas, Vishwanath said, guided by guidance, they didn't realize that the supreme benefactor of the sacrifices that they were performing was requesting their help. They didn't realize that. So the boys kept insisting, but the Brahmanas, they became upset because they were being told by children what to do. These cowherd boys are Brajbasis, they're self-realized souls, prem bhakti. They wouldn't listen because they're just boys. And one Brahmana, he had the audacity, it was a strong word, the audacity to say to the boys, or just to say out loud, this is how Kali Yuga enters. These greedy boys are asking us for unoffered food, and they want it for boys who some say are gods. They're saying that Krishna and Balaram are God. They want, but gods are never hungry. They're always self-satisfied. You see their ignorance. This is an interesting chapter, isn't it? Now, at this point, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives us the reasons why these learned Brahmins ignored the boys' request. Everything's explained in Krishna consciousness. Perfect questions, perfect answers. There's no question that cannot be answered in the philosophy, the tattva of Krishna consciousness. We are so fortunate, we are so blessed. So what are the reasons that these Brahminical men, with all due respect, could not understand what was happening? He gives three reasons, Vishwanath. Because of their hard-heartedness from performing animal sacrifice, because of a lack of piety, and because, above all, he says, the absence of Krishna's mercy in their lives. Wow. That's everything. If you have nothing, but you have Krishna's mercy in your life, you have everything. If you have everything, but you don't have Krishna's mercy, I'm sorry, sir, you have nothing. So these Brahmanas, Krishna's mercy was absent in their lives. I was reading online the other day a nice quote. It says, where mercy, love, and piety dwell, God dwells there all the while. I mean, it's not from our Shastra, but it probably will sometimes quote. Where mercy, love, and piety dwell, God dwells there all the while. So finally, the coward boy says, this is not going to work. We're not getting anywhere. And they were very disappointed because although we're hearing how much they want to eat, they want to see Krishna eat first. We should think like that. You know, it's a fast day and we're thinking, you know, John Masami, hurry up. Let's, 12, midnight. No, we should be thinking, let Krishna eat this 108 preparations, and then I'll think about eating. This is Krishna consciousness. This is our training. The disciple serves the spiritual master, and after the spiritual master is finished eating, because he's Krishna's representative, then the disciples eat. They wait. This is etiquette. We have to be well-versed in etiquette, Krishna conscious etiquette, in order to advance properly and not make offenses. So they got disappointed. Vishwanath writes, I keep quoting him, but what better source of knowledge? He writes, with disappointment written on their faces and feet dragging, they returned to where Krishna and Balaram were waiting. But the boys were reluctant to report directly to Krishna, so instead they addressed Balaram. They said, "O Rama, just imagine what happened to us. Although we requested food in your names, we were ignored. They were flabbergasted. How could someone refuse what Krishna wanted? They're pure devotees." Then turning to Krishna, they said, "Dear friend, we failed to bring back anything for you. All we managed to consume was our pride and the smoke of the sacrificial fire." This is poetry. This is real poetry. We have failed to bring anything back for you. All we have managed to consume was our pride and the smoke from the sacrificial fire. But Krishna, he's all merciful, right? He just laughed and he said, "Beloved friends, why should you show anger towards ignorant Brahmanas or find fault with them? No doubt they were too busy to listen to your pleas. The nature of begging is that one is often refused." Again, 2 times Krishna is stressing tolerance. Just like Mahaprabhu in his Shikshastakam prayers, he also mentions tolerance. One time Prabhupada was on an airplane with one of his servants and the AC, the air conditioning went off before taking off. To sit in the tamarack for a long time and wait for the guy to come and fix the AC before the plane took off. Everyone was complaining to the stewardess, yelling at the captain. And then Prabhupada's secretary chimed in, "Yeah, what about the AC?" And Prabhupada said, "Stop. If we can't tolerate, then we're just like them. We have to practice tolerance. Because no matter how much scientific knowledge and technology there is to make life a little more comfortable, there'll always be uncomfortable situations." Prabhupada said material life is problematic from the cradle to the grave. So we can't let these difficulties, even these traumatic experiences, deter us from keeping our focus, Eke Kudanandana, on the goal, Krishna consciousness. We can't get too much into politics. We can't worry too much about worldly affairs, even our own bodies. We try as best we can, but if it's not working, all right, Hare Krishna, I'll tolerate till I leave this mortal frame. But I won't forget Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. So then Krishna paused. This is like we're getting a view of Braj through the eyes of pure devotees. It's like, it's miraculous. Krishna paused and he said, now, and he smiled, he said, "Go to the Brahmins' wives and ask them for food." And Vishwanath said, the boys looked at Krishna in disbelief. One boy said, "But Krishna, surely we'll get the same treatment from them as we did from their husbands." Yeah. But Krishna smiled and said, "No, you won't. These Brahmanas' wives are different. They're different." But the boys weren't convinced. That was Sakiras. Another boy stood up and he said, "But how are the wives of the Brahmanas different than their husbands? They're married to those foolish men." A woman in Vedic culture became a Brahmani by serving her husband, the Brahmana. In Vedic culture, women didn't get Gayatri mantra. Prabhupada introduced that out of his causeless mercy to the ladies, our sisters, in his movement. He said the girls are doing as much as the boys. So he made an exception as acharya, and he gave Gayatri mantra to women. But in Vedic culture, a woman would become Brahmani by serving her husband. Just like we become pure by serving the pure devotees, Srila Prabhupada. So one boy, he said, how are they different? They're all married to the same foolish men. So then Krishna paused. And thinking of the wives of those Brahmanas, who he knew were his devotees, he said something is going to melt your heart. Are you ready? He said, how are they different? Because like you, they also love me. Wow. That's another tattoo. Because like you, they also love me. It's all about love, divine love, love for Krishna. How do we get that love? In our lives, which are busy as bees, we find time to sit down, perform the yajna for this age, the Yuga Dharma. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everything's achieved by that one instruction. It's 9 o'clock, but I got special grace. They told me I could go till 9:30. Because there's more nectar coming. But if you have some services to do, you can leave, or if you're hungry. But I'll go on a little bit longer. I don't have that much longer, but it really gets me. Krishna consciousness always gets better. So because like you, they also love me. And it said with that answer, Vishwanath said, a spark of hope twinkled in the cowherd boy's eyes. It's like this would make a great movie. A spark of hope twinkled in the boy's eyes, and our eyes, too, upon hearing these things. So the boy said, all right, Krishna, we'll go and ask them for food, the wives of the Brahmanas. But what if their husbands object? Oh no, another obstacle. What if the husbands say, no? Then Krishna said something also very beautiful. He said, my dear friends, these women's minds live in me. Only their bodies live in their homes. Surely they will disregard their husband's objections. Isn't that beautiful? Krishna's giving us hope. These women's minds live in me. Only their bodies live in their homes. Surely they will disregard their husband's objections. And the boys ran like the wind. Remember, they're hungry. Frogs and snails and puppy dog tail. They ran to find the wives of the Brahmanas. And when they finally found them, they were like struck with wonder. Because all these ladies, they were seated on golden chairs, decorated with ornaments, radiating, radiating complete detachment from sense gratification. Wow. If you just get to that point of giving up all your anarthas, you radiate you radiate because of your detachment. A detached person, totally detached person, is someone very glorious. That's called mukti. To get to the point of having no material desires, and you glow like the sun. Like Prabhupada said one time, I remember in Geneva, in a lecture, he said, he's describing the soul, and he kind of sat back and he smiled. He said, the soul is more brilliant than 10,000 suns rising simultaneously. So it was due to their complete detachment from sense gratification, but he says more so, even more so, more poignant of course, is due to their intense feelings of separation from Krishna. So the boys thought, seeing these women, that they were convinced just by looking at them. Just like one time Prabhupada was walking across the street in London with his servants, and a policeman grabbed Shamasundar. He said, look, your teacher's glowing like the sun. He said that. Just a conditioned soul. He looked at Prabhupada. He said, look, he's glowing like the sun. Srila Prabhupada ki. So seeing these women who were self-effulgent, the boys thought, they are surely devoted to our Krishna. they're surely devoted to it. They're one of us, one of our kind. Like sometimes in Prabhupada's lectures, if you listen carefully, he'll say, our Krishna. When I first heard that, I took a kind of sense of pride, you know? Yeah, our Krishna. He's our Krishna. And we're his and he's ours. That's devotional service. So at first sight of the boys, right? Love is reciprocal. At first sight of the boys, the ladies thought, who else could these gopas be but Krishna's friends? So the stage is set. So sometimes the question may be asked, how exactly did the Brahmins' wives develop deep attachment for Krishna? Because they're married to these men who have no attachment to Krishna. So the acharyas say that there's a combination of factors which contributed to their attachment to Krishna. They're living with these men who are not inclined at all, and they have to carry out duties in that relationship, in that mundane household. Well, not mundane in the sense that they're doing something, at least they're going to Svargaloka, they're chanting mantras, but there's no Krishna consciousness there. So how in the world did these women become so elevated? So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur answers that question. He said, number one, sadhus had regularly come through the village giving narrations about Krishna. That's what we do, right? We go travel the world and we go to people's homes and then they hear about Krishna and they take up the process. So these ladies, fortunately, sadhus had come through the village, and you know, village ladies, they gather together, they have bhajans, you know, they make garlands, so the Brahmins, and they'd sit and listen. Another reason they became Krishna conscious was because this is really sweet. Get ready for this one. They had occasionally heard the sweet notes of his flute resounding through the Vrindavan forest. Wow! They had heard Krishna's flute. Krishna said the sound of Krishna's flute is very potent in many ways. Actually controls the gopis. And in one instance, we know that when Krishna, at the beginning of creation, when Brahma appeared on the lotus flower, he didn't know where to go or what to do, he performed tapas, sacrifices. So Krishna was pleased. Krishna came and he played his vamsi. He played his flute. And that flute music went into the ear of Brahma and to his heart. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, as a result of hearing the flute of Krishna, he understood he was what? An eternal maidservant of Krishna. I read that many times. But then it just clicked on me one day. A maidservant of Krishna? A gopi. Because Prabhupada has said that the followers of Lord Chaitanya, in general, those who take to the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, generally they're aspiring for that relationship with Krishna in the spiritual world, or Radha as a gopi. All other relationships are welcome because Krishna desires those relationships. Vaikuntha has many planets with many incarnations, and the devotees want to be on that specific planet, and Krishna wants them to be there. Matsya, Kurma, and the Sringa, etc. But those who are followers of Mahaprabhu, genuine followers, generally, there's some exceptions like Anupam, the brother of Rupa and Sanatan, he was a Ram Bhakta, and others. But generally they're aspiring for this, Braj Bhakti, because that's the special message that Mahaprabhu brought, and the means to achieve it. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Rama. So when Brahma heard the flute music, I'm an eternal maidservant of Krishna. I went, wow. So occasionally these wives of the Brahmanas, they'd hear the flute. And this flute awoke their prema bhakti. Another reason Vishwanath says that they became fully Krishna conscious was that while buying flowers from the gardeners in Vrindavan, they had heard descriptions of Krishna's form, qualities, and heroic deeds. They're going shopping and they're becoming Krishna conscious. This is Vrindavan. You go shopping and the shopwala, Prabhuji, please, Hare Krishna, give me some more. Or he'll say, Sri Radhe, come sit down. But he said Sri Radhe. So they're buying flowers from the gardeners, but these gardeners are fully Krishna conscious and they're narrating pastimes of Krishna. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki. So at this point, the boys, they very respectfully, they said, O gentle wives of learned Brahmins, we are close friends of Krishna, and we offer our obeisances at your lotus feet. You please now hear our appeal. They'd made the appeal before to the men, now the ladies. Now, in their request, Krishna's name was mentioned. In fact, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said one time, you can judge the quality of a class by how many times the speaker says the name of Krishna. Krishna, 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 Krishna. He said that's kind of cute, right? So, O gentle wives of the Brahmanas, we are close friends of Krishna, and we offer our obeisances to your lotus feet. Please hear our appeal. Now, when the ladies heard the name Krishna, they erupted in the 8 ecstatic symptoms of love of God. Some fainted, some became bewildered, others, they were like wandering around. They were saying of that name Krishna. This is also very nice. They're saying, what mystical mantra is this? I love that. This mantra is so mystical. We become familiar, unfortunately, sometimes, that we may sometimes chant mechanically. Here, these ladies are saying, what mystical mantra is this? What mystical mantra is it? and they were just like frantic and unconscious and not able to speak, tears flowing from their eyes. And the cowherd boy's like, what happened? What happened? So the boys tried to calm them down, and when they were unable to do so, in unison they cried out, Matas, Krishna's hungry, and you should give food to him and his friends. They came in second, that's okay. And when the ladies heard the word Krishna's hungry, when it entered into their ears, they immediately came back to their senses. Yes, Krishna's hungry? One of the boys said, and I'll recite what they actually said. O wives of the Brahmanas, today we had no breakfast. We're extremely hungry from playing all day. Krishna, the reigning Cupid of Vrindavan. Wow. I mean, where do you hear phrases like this in this world? Krishna, the reigning Cupid of Vrindavan, the object of your worship, has sent us to beg for food. He's waiting nearby with his elder brother Balaram, who's as powerful as Indra. As a baby, he mercifully made Putana his nurse. The boys are speaking such elevated knowledge. As a child, he smashed Trinivarta to the earth, killed the giant Aga, and banished Kaliya from the Jamuna. Need we say more of he whose glories are like an ocean of all sublime things in creation? What? Whose glories are like an ocean of all sublime. I'm running out of room for tattoos. So I don't have any tattoos. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he writes that the Brahmanas' wives felt as if Krishna had suddenly appeared before them. And the thought that they might soon meet him face to face melted their hearts and captured their minds. So he says, still experiencing these symptoms of love of God, they somehow made it to the kitchen, and they cooked a variety of fresh cooked food. Vishwanath uses that word, fresh cooked food should be taken fresh. Then, taking everything in like baskets on their heads, they followed the cowherd boys into the forest where Krishna, Balaram, and all the other boys were waiting. So Vishwanath says that the playful cowherd boys kept running ahead like this to encourage the ladies. Come on, Matas, come. While he says, guiding them with gentle voices. What's that? I guess that's Krishna consciousness, right? You speak in a gentle way, softly. Guiding them with gentle voices. Matas, come, come. But every so often, the women couldn't keep up with the boys. So every once in a while, the women would ask, how much further? You know, like when you were young in the car with your father, you're going, Dad, how much farther is it? But Vishwanath says, the weight of their love, combined with the weight of the food they carried, made them move too slowly for the cowherd boys, who finally just said up, Mata, hurry up, hurry up. The weight of their love? What? The weight of their love combined with the weight of the food. Okay, I can understand the weight of the food. The weight of their love, I'd have to just chant Hare Krishna so I can realize what that is. So finally, they all made it to the riverbank where Krishna and Balaram, they're also hungry, they're boys. And a beautiful description is given that Krishna first greeted them. How did Krishna greet them? There's so much etiquette in our movement. How did Krishna greet all the boys and the wives of the Brahmanas who were coming with baskets of food? He didn't just say, all right, come on, hurry, let's eat. No, there's etiquette. You say the prayer before you take prasadam. There's etiquette, and you meditate on the meaning of that prayer. How Krishna is so kind to give us this prasadam to conquer our senses and awaken our love. So Krishna met them. He greeted them with what? As they came into the clearing. He greeted them with three things. His unmistakable bodily fragrance. With his blackish effulgence. And then with his deep sounding voice. They didn't see him physically. They didn't see him, his form. They smelled his unmistakable fragrance, then some blackish effulgence, and then his deep voice. And then Krishna appeared before them in person. Oh my God, OMG. When, oh when will that day be mine? That's that prayer. We have to think like that constantly. When, oh when will that day be mine? When, oh when? That's the mood in Vrindavan. Where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? Like the 6 Goswamis in their Sad Goswami Ashrakam. They're looking for Krishna everywhere. We're hoping, when will that mercy reach me? So he appeared. And Shastra says at that moment, the ladies paused to convince themselves that it was actually Krishna they were seeing and not a mirage created by their eager minds. Are you really there? You have to pinch yourself. Is this really happening? So then Krishna, he revealed that, yes, it's actually me. He stood there twirling a lotus flower in his right hand. In his right hand. And he was broadcasting 2 messages to these ladies. One, ladies, I have taken your lotus hearts and I am twirling them about. Wow. He's got the lotus and he's twirling it. As if to say, ladies, I've taken your lotus hearts and I'm twirling them about, and by your love, you have made my heart twirl in happiness. Wow. We can go on till Arctic this evening, there's so much nectar. And the ladies thought, today, at long last, the object of our meditation has appeared before our eyes. Now our lives are successful. That's success in life, when you come to the point of coming face to face with Krishna. Prabhupada told one of his secretaries, who told me, he said it's a bit intimate, he said, Prabhupada told him that when we get back to the spiritual world, your spiritual master is waiting for you. He takes your hand, walks you into the grove, into the kunja, and places your hand in the hand of Krishna and leaves you alone together for some time. That's what Prabhupada said. So the ladies thought, today at last the object of our meditation has appeared before our eyes. Now our lives are success. Then you can say, all I've done, all my chanting charms. That's Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of my favorite things he said. He said, all my chanting charms. Chanting is charming. It's charming. The results are charming. All my chanting charms have come to bear. Krishna. So while balancing the baskets of food on their head, right? You know how ladies, they can walk, and so interesting how they walk, you know, they can even run, I've seen, with the pot or the basket on their heads here in India. They folded their hands and they welcomed Krishna into their hearts. It said that they were enchanted that he was simultaneously in 2 places, standing before them in the Papadavan forest and in their hearts at the same time. Like, how do you do that, Krishna? You're standing before us in the forest, but we feel you, we feel your presence in our hearts. When, oh when will that day be ours? And it will. Yes, we're young, we're works in progress, but we have to have faith that that day will come. So finally Krishna said, welcome, O fortunate ladies. Please set your pots on the ground and sit down. I can see that you have great love for me because unlike your husbands, you brought the food. So all the wives of the Brahmanas They sat around Krishna just as the gopis would do in the future. And he said to them, "It is natural that you are attached to me in the manner of great souls, for I reside within the heart of every living being as a super soul. Dearer to the individual soul than the body, the husband, sons, daughters, and family. As the indwelling guide of everyone, I always hold you close to me from within. Rather than remaining here, therefore, you should return to your husbands and help them complete the sacrifice." Like, what? Krishna's telling them to leave. I'm always within you as a super soul, he's saying. He says something similar to the gopis later. I'm in your heart, so you can go now. I'm with you. Go back to your husbands and help them with their sacrifice. The ladies were stunned. He was welcoming them. At the same time, he was requesting them to leave. They thought, how could he send us away just a few moments after welcoming us? And tears flows from their eyes, Vishwanath says, as they replied, "Krishna, how can we give you up, the super soul standing before our very eyes?" So Krishna said, "By obedience to my order, which is to help your husbands." We follow the instruction of our superiors. So then they responded with the exact same words the gopis were to use later when Krishna called them to the forest and then asked them to return home. The wives of the Brahmanas said, the same Sanskrit, "Maivam vibho rati bhavan garitum nari samsham," which means, "O Almighty One, please do not speak such cruel words. It took me so long to come here. Please don't send me away." I remember one time at a Vyasa Puja, one of Shivaram Maharaj's disciples, Gaurangi, she said, "Guru Maharaj, it took you so long to find me. Please never cast me away." What a wonderful sentiment. "Guru Maharaj, it took you so long to find me. Please never cast me away." So the gopis are saying, "Almighty One, you're speaking very cruel words. You're asking us to go." They insisted that Krishna allow them to remain in the forest as his maidservants. They said to him, "We've already surrendered our lives and souls to you by leaving behind our families and homes. Isn't it clear to you by now that we no longer identify as the Brahmana community?" But Krishna persisted. You know what he said? This is pretty strong language to these girls. He said, "I am a cowherd boy. Only unmarried cowherd girls are suited to be my maidservants or lovers." Whoa. This is Vishnu, this is very deep. "I'm a cowherd boy, only unmarried, parikya, only unmarried cowherd girls are suited to be my maidservants or lovers." I'm not qualified to go any deeper than that, but he said to these wives of the Brahmanas, "People will criticize you and say you are chaste by staying here." So meditating on Krishna's words and his instructions, the ladies finally said, "So be it. We'll be criticized, we'll be abused, so be it." And they lowered their heads and said, "But will our desire for a loving relationship with you ever be fulfilled?" They had to go home. So they're thinking like, will we ever have a loving relationship with you? So Krishna smiled and he gave them the same instruction he would later give to the gopis. And this is very important to all of us, even at our stage of devotional service. He said, "It is by hearing about me, seeing my deity form, meditating on me, and chanting my names and glories that love for me develops, not by physical proximity. Therefore, go back to your homes. You can become Krishna conscious anywhere. By hearing about me, by seeing my deity form, Panchatattva, Gaurnitai, Krishna Balaram, Radha, by seeing my form, meditating on me, chanting my names, Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya, going Sankirtan, and glories. That's how love develops for me, not by physical proximity. So go home." So with that, the ladies left. Now, the fact that they left has been a point of discussion for a long time by our acharyas. For when Krishna instructed the gopis to return to their husbands, unlike the wives of the Brahmanas, they said, nope, we're not going. But people will speak ill of you, you'll lose your reputation. So what? By staying here, we'll please you because you are most satisfied in the company of your pure devotees. No one's happy alone. We're only happy in the company of others. So the gopis wanted to stay, not for their pleasure, because they knew that Krishna would be happy because they were there. This is bhakti. This is pure devotion. They're willing to give up their reputation if Krishna's happy. They didn't care what people would say. They were prepared to sacrifice everything. I was listening to a lecture recently, and Prabhupada was speaking about the different sevas that different devotees offer various incarnations of the Lord. Then he stopped and he said, but the gopis, they never asked Krishna for anything. And Prabhupada broke down crying. That was the end of the lecture. It was a 10-minute lecture. The gopis, they never asked Krishna for anything. They just wanted to give, to give, to give, to give. When, oh, when will that day be ours? So in that sense, the gopis are considered more glorious and more advanced than the wives of the Brahmanas. But those Brahmanis would attain Krishna in the future just the same. In time, the desires of the Brahmanis, those wives, would be fulfilled, but they had to wait until the next birth to be with Krishna physically. They would take birth in different capacity as Brajagopis. So we can understand, by serving Krishna in separation, they could develop the same intensity of love that the young Brajagopis have for Krishna, and this way achieve perfection. And so can we. And what is the process? Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama. So then the acharyas go one level a little deeper. They say, the conclusion of this pastime is that by serving Krishna in the mood of separation, we will achieve his company at the time of his choosing. When it's his desire, then we will become Krishna conscious. Now, just a quick note. It's interesting that Shukadeva Goswami mentions one exception amongst these wives of the Brahmanas, that girl who was just getting to that point of having those 10 ecstatic symptoms. One exception amongst the wives, who, unlike her friends, she was immediately able to associate with Krishna at that point. This lady, she had a very bad-tempered husband who didn't allow her to go to take the food to Krishna in the forest. He kept her from going with the others to see Krishna that day. She was feeling so much separation from Krishna. Again, this mood of separation comes in. So much separation from Krishna. She just absorbed herself in loving thoughts of Krishna. Seeing that intense mode of separation, which brought her to that stage more than the wives of the other wives of the Brahmanas, Krishna appeared to her and said, give up everything and come to live with me now in Vrindavan. So Vishwanath says, by the power of Krishna's mercy, his Kripa Shakti, that Brahmani, that wife of the Brahmana, she gave up her body and surrendered to Krishna, and she was awarded with that seva. And unlike her friends, she became Gopi. So finally, 3 minutes left, one might ask, what happened to the men? All glories to the wives of the Brahmanas. Woo! All glories to the cowherd boys. Woo! All glories to Krishna Balaram. Hey, there were other actors, in this drama, the spiritual drama. What about those poor men? And that's actually described in these last 5 verses that I read today, in conclusion of this chapter. What happened to those Brahmin men? Well, there's a famous passage in the Srimad Bhagavatam where they say, to hell with our threefold birth, to hell with our vow of celibacy, and to hell with our extensive learning. They said like that, seeing how their wives got so much mercy. They said, Bhagavatam says, beholding the effulgence of their wives and sensing their own comparative worthlessness, these Brahmin men cast aside their pride and sat upon the ground, stunned. They saw that by surrendering to Krishna, what elevated state their wives had attained. So they just said, to hell with our birth, our celibacy, our extensive learning. We're simply worthless. They sat down on the ground, stunned. We're so unfortunate. They all thought, we were bewildered by Lord Krishna's illusory potency, and thus we could not understand his influence as the original personality of Godhead. Now we hope against hope he will kindly forgive us for our offense. And Krishna does. It may take a long time. But the incarnation of Krishna in this age, Krishna Varnam Twisha Krishnam Shangupanga Parshadam Yagnai Sankatan Prayar Yajantihi Shu Meda Shaha. Prabhupada said, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he doesn't consider our offenses. Not that we should take advantage of that. He doesn't consider, he only looks to see what service they've done. All these boys and girls working so hard to serve my representative, Srila Prabhupada, in the material world. Let them all come back home, back to God. But they did this, they did that, so what? That's Mahaprabhu. Like Prabhupada said one time in New York. He said, before coming to me, you were all dirty and sinful and fallen. But when you heard the chanting of Hare Krishna, you came running. Srila Prabhupada ki. We heard him chanting in Hippie Hill, we heard him chanting in London, and no matter what our phones say, he made the hippies into happies. So they're hoping against hope. And even we can hope against hope. If we're praying to Krishna, he's our ever well-wisher. Eventually we'll get delivered. But if we're born in Kali Yuga, we serve the Sankirtan movement. As Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said one time at initiation ceremony, 1932, he said to all the prospective candidates, I see no reason why all my disciples cannot come back to Godhead in one lifetime. Just chant Hare Krishna. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki. So the happy ending to this pastime, because every event has to have a happy, you have to end on a high note, like in music. Right? So in Krishna consciousness, there's always a happy ending. Even the demons get delivered. So what's the happy ending to this class today? The boys got to eat. Woo! Haribol! And if I stop talking, you're also going to get to eat. So when the prasadam arrived from the wives of the Brahmanas, Krishna had all his friends sit in rows. And then Krishna, with his own hand, he served his friends. Beginning with what? Beginning with the boys who went to beg at Bartor. Those boys went out, they accepted the challenge, they got prasadam. And then Krishna himself sat in the midst of his friends and took good pleasure eating that feast. For it's said that he, Krishna, always enjoys eating good foods that have been cooked with love, skillfully prepared, and artistically presented. And a transcendental side note here, as usual at that feast, Madhu Mangal became intoxicated from eating, he just ate the sweets, he didn't eat all the other thing. And in an intoxicated state, these are the final words, listen to what he said. He's totally intoxicated, eating all the sweet. He says to Krishna, Balaram, and all the boys, Dear friends, please listen to me so that you may more fully appreciate what you are eating. Food cooked in exchange for payment is third class. Superior to that is food one eats at home. But food obtained by begging from affectionate well-wishers is superior to either of those. That is first-class food, Madhukari. But Krishna, this food surpasses even first-class food. Therefore, my suggestion is that you call all these Brahmanis back, these wives of the Brahmanas, and lock them up in a hut in the forest where they can cook for us all year long because this food is so good. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, he concludes, he says, Krishna and Balaram laughed at Madhu's outrageous proposal, and the other boys laughed along with them, while feasting their eyes on the two brothers, Krishna and Balaram, as they rocked back and forth in great laughter, relishing the prasadam brought by these wives of the Brahmanas. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki, Krishna Balaram Mandir Ki, Shri Gauranitai Ki, Krishna Balaram Ki, Shri Radha Samsundar Ki, Vrindavan Eshwari Shrimati Radharani Ki, Srila Prabhupada Samadhi Mandir Ki, chanting Hare Krishna back home, back to Godhead Ki. Take all the fallen conditioned souls with us. K. Go Premanande. Jai Jai Sri Radhe.